This is the audio script for the PM Group 3 dealing with Chapter 5, the Lewis-Schmeling fight. Their presentation will be on April 14th, Thursday. Their big idea is we are going to talk about sports and politics, and our starting point will be the Lewis-Schmeling fight. We would like to show how politics often uses sport events as propaganda and how decisions related to sports are in fact sometimes made for political reasons. Introduction. Hi everyone, we are Group 3 and our project is about sports and politics. I would like to give you a brief introduction to two world-famous boxers. They are Joe Louis and Max Schmeling. Louis, 1914 to 1981, was an American professional boxer. He held the World Heavyweight Championship title from 1937 to 1949. Schmeling, 1905 to 2005, was a German boxer who was heavyweight champion of the world between 1930 and 1932. Now, let's come back to the 1930s, focusing on two matches between Louis and Schmeling. Schmeling handed Louis his first professional loss by knocking him out in round 12 at Yankee Stadium in 1936. Following his defeat of Louis in 1936, Schmeling became a national hero in Germany. His victory over Louis was touted by Nazi officials as proof of their doctrine of Aryan superiority. 2 years later, Louis and Schmeling met for the second time in the boxing ring. The fight was held in Yankee Stadium on the night of June 22, 1938. It was broadcast by radio to millions of listeners throughout the world, with radio announcers reporting on the fight in English, German, Spanish, and Portuguese. Schmeling was knocked down 3 times and only managed to throw 2 punches in the entire bout. The rematch between Louis and Schmeling would become one of the most famous boxing matches of all time and is remembered as one of the major sports events of the 20th century. Because Louis was widely regarded as the first African American to achieve the status of a nationwide hero within the United States. Okay, something strange is there. This is just a clause, and you can't do that because it needs to be connected to something. So let me see what happened. The rematch between Louis and Schmeling would become one of the most famous boxing matches of all time and is remembered as one of the major sports events of the 20th century. I guess you need to connect this here by making it a small b and having no period, which makes a bit of a long sentence. The rematch between Louis and Schmeling would become one of the most famous boxing matches of all time and is remembered as one of the major sporting events of the 20th century because Louis was regarded as the first African American hero. Was regarded as the first. All right, the sentence is too long even for me. Okay. The rematch between Louis and Schmeling would become one of the most famous boxing matches of all time and is remembered as one of the major sports events of the 20th century, period. Let's just take out because. Louis was regarded as the first African American to achieve the status of a nationwide hero within the United States. Okay, that works. Furthermore, Louis used his muscles to beat Germany Nazi. Okay. It should be Nazi Germany. Okay, let's try this again. The rematch between Lewis and Schmeling would become one of the most famous boxing matches of all time, and is remembered as one of the major sports events of the 20th century. Lewis was widely regarded as the first African American to achieve the status of a nationwide hero within the United States. Furthermore, Lewis used his muscles to beat Nazi Germany. As Lewis later admitted, "The whole damned country was depending upon me," or was depending on me. He did it and gave a good beating to the German Nazi propaganda machine. In the following part, Arkady will give us another good example of sports with significant political meaning. It is about Jesse Owens. Now let's welcome him. A lot of statistics here. I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do. Jesse Owens, September 12th, 1913, March 31st, 1980. The unique achievements: 4 world records in the space of 45 minutes. May 25th, 1935, Michigan. 3:15 p.m. equaled the world record for the 100-yard dash. 3:25 p.m., the world record in the long jump. 3:34 p.m., the world record for the 220-yard dash. 4 p.m., the world record for the 220-yard low hurdles. 4 Olympic gold medals with 4 Olympic records. The 100-meter dash, 10.3 seconds, the Olympic record. The 200-meter dash, 20.7 seconds, the Olympic record. The long jump, 8.06 meters, the Olympic record. We have a link for a video here. I'm not sure how to say this, the 4 times 100 meters, or the 4 100-meter relay. 3 extremely long-lasting, ing. Awards: Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest award given to civilians by the U.S. government, 1976, by President Gerald Ford. The Congressional Gold Medal, 1990, posthumously, which means after someone died. Honors: the Jesse Owens Memorial Plaza, the Jesse Owens Memorial Park. In the following part, Rami will tell you about the movie Rocky. Until now, we have talked about reality. But I also want to introduce how Hollywood reproduced a similar situation to the one we saw in our video, but in a fictional story. Rocky IV. Have you seen Rocky IV? It was the first thing I thought of when I saw the video about the Lewis and Schmeling fight. So Rocky IV is more than an inspiring underdog story. Beyond unfolding the heroics of the boxer and American heavyweight champion Rocky Balboa, the story highlights the complexities of the Cold War and the possibility of a nearly forgotten peace. American boxing champion Rocky Balboa, Sylvester Stallone, travels to Moscow to fight Ivan Drago, or Ivan Drago, Dolph Lundgren. By the mid-1980s, decades into the Cold War, the United States and the former Soviet Union had been embroiled in years of distrust, competition, and indirect armed conflict. Many significant and traumatic events involving these two superpowers had already begun or taken place during the Cold War, including the Berlin blockade, the Korean War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Vietnam War, and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. So, beyond fighting and threats of violence, competition between the United States and the evil empire of the Soviet Union had taken place at many levels and in many arenas. Within this context, Rocky IV was created in the year 1985. The film parallels the historic tension of the Cold War. More importantly, the film communicates the powerful message that despite the two countries' long history of rivalry and hatred, everyone can change. The fictional story of Rocky IV does an excellent job of conveying the significant cultural competition and mutual hostilities that had developed between the Americans and the Soviets during the Cold War. As an example, the first thing we see in the movie are two huge boxing gloves. One features the flag of the United States, and the other the flag of the Soviet Union. And, at the end, in the movie, Rocky not only defeats Soviet national pride, the initially hostile local audience abandons its support for the Russian fighter and starts cheering for Rocky once they realize the latter has a better chance of winning. So Rocky defeats Drago, but also the collectivist ideology. Now we go back to reality and, let's start again. Now we go back to reality to know how politics used sports in the 1968 Soccer World Cup. And I think the best person to explain it to us is an Argentinian, Dolores. Mexico, 1968 World Cup, Argentina versus England. Malvinas history. The Malvinas Islands are a group of islands located in the Argentinian Sea, in the South Atlantic Ocean, only 341 kilometers from the Argentinian Patagonia. According to the UN, it is a disputed territory between Argentina and the United Kingdom, who in 1833 took them by force and managed them as a British Sea territory. In 1892, the UK declared them to be their colony. In 1960, the United Nations asked colonial countries to end colonialism, and the UK accepted. Time passed by, but the UK never returned them. The UN asked both the Argentinian and British governments to negotiate peacefully. The UK never agreed to negotiate. Argentina still claims the Malvinas, and it is supported by many other countries, dictatorships in Latin America, and the Condor Plan. During the 70s, most Latin American countries were governed by military dictatorships: Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, Brazil, Paraguay, Peru, Nicaragua, and Guatemala. The Condor Plan was a plan of coordinated actions and mutual support between the South American military dictatorships with the support of the U.S. in order to eliminate Marxist terrorist activities in the area. The operation was a plan to coordinate repression internationally. In this context, and after 6 years of dictatorship in decay, Galtieri declared war against the UK in its last attempt to maintain his power. It was an illegal war made by a non-democratic government. The war lasted 74 days, and after that, the UK installed a military base in the islands. World Cup, Mexico. Where are we? Jumped around. Sorry about that. World Cup, Mexico, 1986. Argentina versus England. Argentina versus England, played in 1986, was a soccer match between Argentina and England in the quarterfinals of the 1986 FIFA World Cup at the Estadio Azteca in Mexico City. The game was held 4 years after the Malvinas War between Argentina and the United Kingdom, and was a key part in the already intense football rivalry between Argentina and England. It was also a match which included two of the most famous goals in football history, both scored by Diego Maradona. The first goal, after 51 minutes, was to become known as the Hand of God goal, which Maradona scored by using his hand. After the match, Maradona said, "It was the hand of God. It was divine intervention as punishment to make up for all the wrong done by the British Empire throughout the centuries." Many years later, he also said, "A thief who steals from another thief has 100 years of forgiveness." His second, 4 minutes after his first, saw him dribble past five English players and finally the goalkeeper, and became known as the goal of the century. Argentina won the game 2-1 and went on to win the 1986 World Cup with a victory over West Germany in the final match. Maradona won the Golden Ball for Player of the Tournament. Alizia, Brazil, and the 2016 Rio Olympics. Brazilians are excited that the Summer Olympics will be held in Rio de Janeiro in August 2016. However, Brazil is facing one of its most challenging times in history. We are facing the worst economic recession in the last few decades that includes high inflation and unemployment. Everything is expensive for Brazilians. The president, Dilma Rousseff, is highly unpopular, and there's been public protests in the streets calling for her impeachment. Corruption scandals involving government officials we don't have a verb here. Corruption scandals involving government officials and private businessmen, what? We need something. So there are, this is okay. There are corruption scandals involving government officials and private businessmen. Finally, the Zika virus has been gaining public attention, making travel to Brazil a matter of concern for visitors. Part 6, Valeria. Hi, my name is Valeria, and I'll tell you about influence. Hi, my name is Valeria, and I'll tell you about the influence of politics on soccer. FIFA is the best example. When I started my research, When I started my research, I found that the subject of FIFA corruption is all over the internet. So I'll tell you only some facts that touched me the most. Fact number 1. There is a 250 there. Okay. Again, fact number 1. There is 250 million that FIFA will not pay in Brazilian taxes, and there is 270 million it forced Brazil to spend on a stadium in Manaus that will be used for 4 games in a city that doesn't have a professional team. In fact, it's so remote that it's almost impossible to reach it by car, which is why officials had to have the stadium materials brought in by boat, shipped across the Atlantic from Portugal and up the Amazon River, which seems like a waste of money. Fact 2. Brazil's Budweiser bill was passed to allow the sale of alcohol at World Cup games, even though the host nation banned the sale of alcohol at sporting events in 2003. In the aftermath of deadly fan violence, FIFA was anxious to protect Budweiser from a law designed to protect people. Fact 3, FIFA, a supposed non-profit organization, and its $1 billion reserve fund. Fact 4, Qatar is a place where slavery still exists. Working immigrants cannot leave the country without an exit visa, which has to be approved by an employer. Working conditions are so bad that people are dying on a daily basis. Reports estimate that over 4,000 migrant laborers from India and Nepal will die in Qatar building the infrastructure for the 2022 World Cup. This is shaping up to be the most deadly Middle Eastern construction project since the Egyptian pyramids. There is a lot more to know about the game of FIFA and politics, but you can do your own research if you want to know more. Let's welcome back Ruth, who will conclude our presentation. Conclusion. As you can see through our project, the history of modern professional sport has been littered with incidents in which politics have played a major role. Sports are a powerful tool to engage people, to fly flags, to bring people together, or to show pride and muscle. Sporting success can offer politicians good PR and a valuable photo op or picture. However, there are often serious repercussions when the worlds of sport and politics collide. We talked about the fight between the USA and German Nazis through the Lewis-Schmeling boxing matches and the conflict between Argentina and England through, not the Maradona, but through Maradona's goal. We also talked about how dictators use sports to show power and engage the people. And about how some politicians use sports to earn corrupt money. But as a sports lover, I want to finish our presentation talking about the bright side of sports, also related with politics. Football has played an important role in mending rifts between nations. History has us remember the famous Christmas Day of 1914. Once again. History has us remember the famous Christmas Day 1914 truce during World War I in Flanders, Belgium, when Germany and British troops put down their guns for a day to play soccer. Famous Brazilian star Pelé's 1969 trip to Nigeria with his soccer club, Santos, caused a 3-day ceasefire in the Biafran War, reports the Play Soccer Make Peace project. And in 1994, a soccer match was played between the International Army and FC Sarajevo during the Balkan War. The match made the war stop for 2 hours. Also, when Nelson Mandela, shortly after becoming president of the new post-apartheid South Africa, embraced the country's national rugby team, the Springboks, a symbol of pride for white Afrikaner South Africans, but one of exclusion for blacks. So the Springboks didn't yet have the support of the entire nation. But Mandela worked to change that, urging all of his country to rally behind the team going into the 1995 World Cup. South Africa hosted the contest and the Springboks won. As the nation watched, Mandela hand-delivered the trophy to the team's white captain, Francois Piniard, and shook his hand, a deeply symbolic overture that represented both forgiveness and hope for the future. So, to finish, I want to show you some pictures I love because women, historically, have also used sports to fight for their rights. These pictures are from the Boston Marathon in 1967. Jock Semple trying and failing to stop Catherine Switzer, the first woman who runs this race. Thank you very much, and feel free to ask us whatever you want.